The Everything Except the Law podcast is brought to you by Answering Legal. For more than a decade, attorneys have trusted our 24/7 virtual receptionist service to keep their phones covered and their clients cared for. Now, we're raising the bar with an AI-powered intake chatbot, live translation services in over 180 languages, and 76 seamless tech integrations. Our goal is to make running a law practice simpler while helping you capture every new client opportunity. And don't worry, our receptionist team is still the best in the business at turning first-time callers into loyal clients. Find out what's possible by visiting answeringlegal.com. You'll find a link to our site in the description of this episode. Let's get to the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to Answering Legal's Everything Except the Law podcast. I am your host, Nick Werker. If this is your first time tuning in, this is the podcast where we share expert advice on all the parts of running a law firm that attorneys weren't exactly trained for back in law school or at all. It's been a little while since our last release. I'm thrilled to be back with you, and I'm proud to say that we are making our return in style. With me today, I have Robert Williams, the CEO and founder of ElevAmp. We have a lot to get into in this episode, but let's start by learning everything there is to know about Robert. And so here is your first question. I go in reverse order of like ridiculousness to serious. We're starting at ridiculous. I know this about you, but only vaguely. And so this is a very selfish question for me to ask, but I heard that you could have been a professional ultimate Frisbee player, but you decided to pursue a marketing career instead. Can you tell me about that fact?
Could have been somebody. Could have been somebody. I don't know if I could have been a professional, but I did play through high school and into college. And you're right, I decided to pursue work and education over, honing my athleticism and Frisbee skills. But it's funny, most people get ultimate Frisbee, which is, I've actually got a branded one right over my shoulder here. Hot off the press, came in yesterday in the mail. But I talked to people about ultimate Frisbee, and they always assume it's disc golf, and those are two very different things. But ultimate is more of the like soccer or football style, right on the field, where you're passing it, you're stopping when you catch the Frisbee and you throwing it downfield. And disc golf is very much like golf, but with a disc. But yeah, I was decent, I still have an arm. I can still throw it around. So yeah, fun fact.
If I ever make a trip out to you, I want to see if I can still do it, because long lore story about me is it's a very long time ago now. There's a Johns Hopkins summer camp program for nerdy kids whose parents want them to take 7.5 hours of class 6 days a week during the summer, which is probably why I hate school so much. But they had an ultimate Frisbee tournament, and I, along with my fellow nerd camp people, just launched Frisbees into the end zone and tried to make spectacular catches. And then there were the people that I'm sure you know that do that like line, and they jump to the front of the line and they mess you all up because you've never seen anything like that before. Yeah,
there's coordination, there's plays, there's a lot of strategy. Yeah, I think in high school our strategy, because we were it wasn't big in our high school, it was a club sport, but we took second in state way back in 2004, and I still have that disc. It's probably gonna crack here, it's so old. It's old and brittle, but yeah, our strategy was just huck it downfield and throw it to the most athletic person on our team and let him catch it. That's it.
Down there somewhere, right? Russell Wilson last week for the Giants, down there somewhere, and then unfortunately not down there somewhere. Well, somebody was down there. Aside from or after your heavily accoladed career in Ultimate Frisbee, how did you get into marketing, and what's your experience been like?
Yeah, so I graduated, during a pretty well-known time, 2008, not great conditions economically. Graduated with an econ degree from the University of Washington, go Dogs. But I was lucky and grateful to have had a job all through college. And I was slinging car audio. I was installing car audio into cars, making, custom fab boxes and all that stuff So I held on to that for a little while. And then I think it was 2011, a buddy of mine was actually in the automotive industry in marketing. And he got me, he was my in to become an SEO specialist. And so I was writing, basically back then it was keyword stuffing, Chevrolet of insert city here across a bunch of different, I think I had like 100 accounts, maybe more, General Motors websites. So dove into that field though, because I've always been technical. I've always liked technology, tinkering, taking things apart, sometimes putting them back together. But yeah, I just dove headfirst in that field and learned everything I could learn about it. Much of which we weren't actually applying, right? So we were doing kind of basic SEO, title changes, description writing, H1 through H6, you name it. But yeah, there's a whole world of the technical SEO that I actually really enjoyed. And then fast forward from there, I actually got an opportunity to come in-house at a law firm marketing agency. And it was 3 of us in a tiny closet and was there for over a decade. So kind of helped shape and scale and form just about every role. I either held it or created each role that we had there. All things SEO, advertising, websites, right? So that's been my background, heavy in the marketing side of things. But I'll tell you what, about halfway through that tenure, it became painfully obvious that a lot of the time it wasn't a lead problem for our clients. So we would have conversations, generally monthly, right? Where we'd sit down with our clients and we'd say, Nick, things are looking amazing. Graphs are up and to the right. You're getting more calls than you ever have before. And they would sit there and look at me and go, well, Rob, we're not signing any new clients, right? And so there was a clear disconnect there. So we actually got into the legal technology game. And again, another thing that I just dove headfirst into to figure out what's out there, what are firms using, most of the time, what are they buying and not using, right? But yeah, we tried to kind of bridge that gap to figure out what was going on. So kind of how to where I got to where I am now.
So interesting. So I got into SEO a little bit after you. And I remember I was just so proud. And I found this really cool career that I'm learning so much about. And it's all technical. And I can use my writing experience. I was really big into writing. I wanted to be a creative writer. Everybody wants to do something creative when they're young. And then they realize that we live in a society where you need to make money and parlay that sort of skill into a 40-hour work week. But I remember I'm so excited, and I have my brother-in-law is the smartest person I've ever met, truly. Mm-hmm. And he has such a high processing power. We're sitting down to dinner, and he's like, how's it going? I'm just out of school. And I was like, oh, I'm doing this thing called SEO. Have you ever heard of it? And he was like, oh yeah, I did that all through college for for-profit colleges. It was a total hack, and tore me down. And inside, I was so resentful that my smart brother-in-law had already done this thing. But then you learn that it's what you're saying, right? Not all SEO is created equal. And I was like, oh, he probably just did keyword stuffing for for-profit colleges. Not that I shouldn't say not that there's anything wrong with it. There is something wrong with it. And I had this conversation with my friend yesterday, starting a business, and he wanted to know about SEO. So he's asking me. He does it for, I don't want to get too deep into it, but sports writing. He's a sports writer. He's hiring a bunch of sports writers, and they're starting a network. And he's like, I can't get over it. At my last agency where I was working, some guy claimed that he could write 40 articles. It was either a day or a week, either of which was an absurd number to claim that you could do so he could make more money. He was just pumping them out with AI, and nobody caught on. And it tanked, and it destroyed this business's reputation. And I came up with a rule for my friend Kenny. Kenny, if you're watching this, I love you, buddy. My rule is, if a teacher in your high school would consider it cheating, don't do it for SEO. That's my rule of thumb. I was like, anything other than that, if you have a technical question, feel free to text me. I love you. But don't do anything that your high school teacher would somehow find a way to consider plagiarism or cheating or in some way unethical.
That's a good rule to have. I mean, I think I think it kind of plays to why we can't have nice things, right? Because keyword stuffing back in the day worked really well, and it was always against the guidelines. Like they didn't want that to happen. They wanted quality content, since I can remember. But it worked, so people did it. And they made a lot of money off of it. But yeah, it's only a matter of time before you get caught or it catches up with you, right? At least that's what I found in my life. So try and do the right thing. It's a lot longer lasting, I think, that way.
You look around and you see so many people with impunity doing the wrong thing, but we will not get into the philosophy of that. We could do that. We could do that later.
That's a different
We probably will. Yes, different. Okay. I do want to talk about, because you're very technology focused, and this is something that I'm trying to get more into. And so whenever or like very recently when we spoke, I got to nerd out with you, which is fun. But as it pertains to law firms, like I've gotten so much more into this, and it's been such a hot topic because of what you're saying. Like all of these companies provide so much value. Marketing agencies deliver so much leads and charts going up and to the right. I hope that's up and to the right and not mirrored for anybody. Like in my line of work, we literally facilitate phone calls happening, and people will be like, well, I'm not converting them. So how do law firms embrace technology, and like what technology are they using, and how do they do that in order to affect their bottom line? Because a lot of law firms will be like, well, I need better marketing and more search terms and spend more on advertising or billboards or you name it. But ultimately there's a floor and a bucket that needs to be there, right? Like, what am I talking about here? I got to stop.
Yeah, no, I think the thing that law firms end up doing a lot of the time is buying a lot of technology, period. Right? And so they'll go out and they'll either think they have a problem, or they won't even realize they have a problem, and they'll just have a demo of something pretty cool. They'll end up buying it, and then it'll just sit there. Right? And they're not thinking strategically of like, what purpose does this serve? How does this fit into our process today? How will it shape our process tomorrow? And so it's like Pokemon cards. They got to collect it all. They're like, the more I have, the more efficient I will be. The thing I see the most with law firms is they just have a lot of it, and it's just sitting there. So the thing that I also notice is they're not thinking strategically from like, what do I need to have in place first before I get either the next piece of technology or technology at all, right? So I talk a lot about people, process, tech, and it has to be that order, right? Because what you don't get if you just buy the tech is the person who's in charge of that piece of technology or using that technology, and even more so, like the process that sits on top of that technology. And I think that's why legal technology in general is such a hot vertical, right? Because it's kind of developed to work in lieu of those things. Off the shelf, some of these tools, they're like, we built the thing for you, it'll just work. And then they actually get in there and they realize, oh, actually, no, it doesn't do that, right? You still have to know where to go to push the right button, or know how to integrate the thing, whether it's a web form, a chat, an answering service, right? It's often gone, people go to technology with a reverse mindset, right? I'm going to get the technology, I'm going to become more efficient, I'm going to make more money, right? So like that's just completely backwards. And there's so much that's out there, right? And it demos so well. All of it, like you sit down with the sales person at a tech company, I guarantee you're going to be like, that was awesome. And then you wait a day, you go, wait, what? Well, how does that work though? Like if I were to actually adopt that or purchase that, what would that actually look like? And I think that step is rarely taken.
So take me forwards. People, process, technology. There are two scenarios I bet you deal with all the time. Somebody comes to you and they say, I have no idea what I'm doing and I want to get better at people, process, technology. And then there's people that come and they say, I bought all this technology, I don't use it, and I need you to help me fix it.
Yeah.
How do you do either of those things?
The first thing I always do is an audit. And it's named the People, Process, and Technology Audit. PPT for short, right? Because in either case, Nick, it surfaces a lot of holes, right? So I'll sit down and I'll say, well, what do you call someone who fills out a form on your website? What do you call that? And they're often like, oh, it's a PNC, potential new client. I'm like, cool, great. So what do you call a PNC who's qualified? So they're actually looking for something that you do. Well, that's also a PNC. Okay. And then you have a consultation with an attorney and the PNC, and the attorney says, yeah, this is someone that we think we can help and we want them to retain us. What do you call that? PNC, right? So like just by having those types of questions, we surface like, well, that's too broad of a categorization to work with the technology that you have, right? And not to mention internally, if you're trying to have a conversation with someone, whether it's a vendor or an employee, like someone in charge of your marketing, like how many PNCs did we get? Well, what do you mean? Right? Do you mean a lead? Do you mean a conversion? Do you mean a prospect? Like there's just so much you could call these things. It's really important to kind of define and write out what's supposed to happen so that we're all kind of speaking the same language. Because if you're not speaking the same language internally, what you're probably end up doing is going to try and adopt the technology, which by the way, is going to call those things something differently, probably in the tool, right? So it makes sense to have a clear language internally so you can translate that to the technology you bought. And if you bought some good technology, you can even change what it's called in the technology to fit what you're calling things internally. So yeah, I think there's the first step in any case is just map it out, write it out, have a conversation, actually think about it. And then the next step is like, who is in charge of it, right? So like if you buy a CRM, who at the firm's job is it to make sure that that CRM is being used and the data that's coming out of that is actually accurate and actionable, right? And most of the time when you're looking at an org chart or an accountability chart, whatever you may call it, there's nobody on that's responsible for any of it. I don't know if you've heard of the concept 1 + 1 = 0, but like what ends up happening is multiple people who use the tool are in charge of it or oversee it. And so they're looking at the person next to them going, you got it, right? They're looking at them and saying, no, I thought you got it. And so no one actually has it. So,
it's like the Spider-Man meme.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So there's just so many pitfalls that you can fall into when you approach it from reverse. And by the way, if you do approach it from reverse, the pain you feel is amplified, right? It will highlight your problems and your deficiencies in your people and processes more so than it did before you bought that tech. And it's even more painful because you're spending money, usually monthly, to have that tech that's just kind of sitting there in the wings waiting to be to leverage. So
one thing that I always find it's not even that funny, but it is such a weird concept to think that everyone inside of a different organization speaks a completely different language, and they might be similar, right? But we just did an episode of our other podcast where we talk about what you're talking about, naming conventions for things. So I always thought it was so natural to call a form fill a conversion. So sometimes I'll be speaking to like a vendor where I want to buy something and I'm like, yeah, conversions on the site. They're like, whoa, what are conversions? Good question. And then what happens when they hit the CRM? They're a lead. Where do they go in the CRM? They're in new prospect. Oh, what happens after they go to new prospect? They move through the various names and stages of how one of our salespeople, account executives work them. And I'm going to explain to you what I did. So I messed something up very bad on Thursday, very upset. And this is going to get into the next part of our conversation. But here's what I did. I created a new property in our system where I put it on a web form, and it's now a multi-select web form. You can tell me which services that you're interested. Just like if you came to a law firm, you could select, say it's a personal injury criminal defense firm. You select, I was arrested or I am injured. That's all I did. However, it is new. And so I wanted to retroactively assign that property to anybody who had enrolled in that before. Basically meaning that anybody who had filled out a form before, I wanted a specific product that they were interested in to fill out a specific field in my CRM. So what I did was I went to my web form flow and I hit re-enroll on 3,000 some odd records. And I created 3,000 new deals in my pipeline. Doesn't sound that bad, right? Delete the deals. It updated every single one of their life cycle stages.
Oh, yep. Because
So
those are going to be related, right?
They are related. But we'll talk about that because we're going to talk about your solution. But I figured out a way to reverse it. But I don't do what I did. Don't touch workflows without looking at the end result of the workflows. So I do want to talk specifically about HubSpot. I use HubSpot. I love HubSpot. And I can nerd out with you about HubSpot because I'm only like 2 years into using HubSpot. And so every time you open it, there's new stuff that you can do. But there's so much technology out there for law firms. There's so many CRMs out there for law firms. But I want to talk to you. You're my HubSpot guy. Why is it so valuable for growing law practices to consider and ultimately use HubSpot for their practice?
Well, I'll start off with saying kudos to you because you're using your CRM, which happens to be HubSpot, right? That's the key here, folks. Use the CRM, period. I don't care which one you have. I don't care which one you like more. Just use it, right? Start using it. And I took a keto way back in the day. I've had so many hobbies. You should see my garage. They're just full of dead hobbies. But my sensei said the hardest part of a keto is walking through the front door, right? And it was true. It was just going. Same with the gym, right? Getting fit, the hardest thing is walking through the gym doors. So I think, so why HubSpot? Why am I so big on HubSpot? I have been more successful in getting firms to use HubSpot than any other CRM. And at my previous life, at my previous agency, we actually didn't care. We didn't care which one you used. We wanted you to use it. And we would actually go through great lengths, and I would spend a lot of my time learning and adapting and updating law firm CRMs, regardless of which ones they were, so that they were set up to capture the data that we knew as the marketing agency we needed. And we also knew the law firm needed to make better business decisions, right? But you know what happened? It didn't change behavior. Like I would build the most beautiful, portal in Litify or Lead Docket. It was all integrated, but the intake team just wasn't using it. I have now figured out a full scope system approach with HubSpot as the backbone of that to actually get adoption, right? So and that's the other cool thing about HubSpot is HubSpot in and of itself can replace a lot of the other tools law firms are using or should be using, right? So it's got a marketing hub, right? You can start running campaigns through it, right? You can start sending custom events back to Google Ads to make that data and that algo smarter, right? At a very basic level, it's I call it the MailChimp functionality, right? You can send newsletters and emails through it as well. But the hub that gets the least amount of attention, I think, from law firms and businesses in general is the sales hub. Because the sales hub is so powerful. That's your intake side, right? And I think HubSpot in general, I have yet to hit a ceiling when it comes to adapting it or flexing it or solving some use case or problem or workflow that a law firm needs, right? And I think I've hit a ceiling with just about every other legal specific CRM out there. And they're always getting better, right? But some are really good at the pipeline and automation around that pipeline. And then you go to report on your data and it's just, you still have to export it into an Excel sheet or Google sheet and still visualize it some way, right? HubSpot has that reporting functionality too. In fact, HubSpot has a native pixel code. So it's collecting that marketing attribution information automatically. Right? I don't know of any legal specific CRM that has that functionality. It's going to integrate with other tools, maybe Google Analytics data, CallRail, things like that. But HubSpot is out of the box, just so powerful. So a few things. One, I have yet to hit my ceiling in HubSpot, right? Just like you mentioned, you log in every time there's something new, something cool, something you didn't know existed that you can actually leverage. The reporting functionality within HubSpot, I I no longer set up GA4, right? I did that whole migration from UA to GA4. It was a nightmare. I don't think GA4 is still up to the level UA used to be. But like the reports in HubSpot, even the ones that I already built, and when I build a portal, I build like 45 custom reports that I know law firms need. But like that functionality, such an advantage. Because that actually, at the end of the day, that's the goal for a law firm when it comes to the CRM, is having accurate, actionable data that you can use to adjust things, right? So if we're actually using the CRM, which again, I've had the most success with getting law firms to actually adopt HubSpot. But once they start doing that, we can say, my gosh, your speed to lead is 4 days or a week, or you don't ever follow up, right? Don't spend more money on marketing, folks, right? Figure out how you can get back to the stuff you're getting right now. How can we increase that conversion rate from 2.5% to 5%? Or 5% to 10%. Like what are the things we can do? And the data is what allows you to understand where you should put that effort and that time and perhaps that money, right? So yeah, HubSpot is just so flexible. The problem though that I see is with flexibility comes complexity. The other reason I can't keep up with all the other legal technology and other CRMs that are out there, like I keep tabs on it, but like to do that for each one of those is a job in and of itself, because these tools, there's so much in them. There's so much you can do. And I failed to mention this earlier, actually, but another problem that I see law firms have when it comes to technology is trying to like shoot the moon, right? They're trying to hit a grand slam when it comes to the tech. So they'll buy a HubSpot and they'll want to use every bell, every whistle, every feature in it out of the gate, and you just end up spinning your wheels, right? So actually, I've started offering like a full blown like HubSpot deployment package to my prospects. I kind of stopped doing that because it's so much more labor intensive, and it takes longer for them to just start using the tool at its like basic use case, so they don't actually realize the benefit of the tool for longer. So what I do now is I start with like, here's just the bare, but like, here's what we need to do. We need to have the proper properties in here. You need to have a pipeline that's super simplistic. You need a couple of workflows to automate some things just on the back end so the data makes sense and is accurate and is being updated based on how you're using the tool, rather than asking someone to update the lifecycle stage manually, right? Like, let's do that through knowing where it is in your pipeline. And let's start there. Right? It's that crawl, walk, run concept. Like because you could automate a ton. You could automate just about everything, right? But then you don't really understand what's happening. Your intake team doesn't actually have to move that PNC through the pipeline to the proper stage. So like they don't know what's going on, and therefore they're not adopting it. So yeah, I think that's a long-winded answer to your question, and probably a few other questions in there too, but I just love HubSpot. There's just so much you can do in it. So much that, again, I'm not butting my head up against a wall. Like, there's usually a way. And if there isn't, there's usually an app that can integrate with it.
So my favorite part of HubSpot is, and I didn't have the same ideological approach when we adopted HubSpot here. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like what you're saying, like, let's buy it and build it and put people in charge of like who's responsible for what. But we didn't know, and we didn't build the whole thing out all at once. We used it and then we're like running into walls. We're like, okay, we need this process to be automated. What is so cool to me about HubSpot is that as long as you're using it and people are putting the right information where it needs to be, you can retroactively like update things using workflows. Yeah. So like, my example before of it was a property or it wasn't a property. I can fill out a property based on an action that somebody took, right? I can automatically like put things where they need to be, and you can build your own things to capture whatever you want. I actually have a really cool use case. I think you're going to like this, and we're probably going to have to talk about this afterwards, because I explained this problem to you, and I've had this problem forever. So I will not mention names, but there is a very, very shady marketing guy out there for law firms. Not that there's not many of them, but I'm talking about one.
Say one?
Just one. This example is just one. And we used to be a much smaller company. So this is probably like 6 or 7 years ago, where I would take all of the inbound inquiries about partnerships. And so this guy calls me up. He has XYZ credentials and he wants to partner with us. He's going to send us his law firm owner clients to have their phones answered by us. And in return, we are going to provide him with a level of transparency into like what's going on with his accounts so that he can like give them more data and communicate with us and update things on the fly. He's going to be our sole point of contact for making sure that these people's intake goes as smoothly as possible and is as efficient as possible. And I think to myself, wow, that's such a great idea. Now, there was a couple of red flags that I should have recognized, because at the end of this phone conversation, I asked, this is awesome. How many clients do you have? And he said, I have one. And I should have ended that conversation there, but that's okay. Like, be prepared, believe in yourself. Cool. I love it. So he set up a call tracking software for a number of his clients, and he very quickly grew to about 4 or 5 clients. And true to his word, he sent them to us. And true to my word, I liaised with him to hone in the way that they were doing things, because he had a very complicated setup and he was doing shady marketing for these people, and it needed to be a specific way. So he sets up call tracking, he sets up the answering service, and I don't hear from him for a number of weeks. And he starts calling the company. He doesn't call me. He starts calling our support team, and he's livid, screaming, you guys are double billing us. This is shady. You're charging us the wrong amount. I just got my first bill, and it's like 3 times as much as what you're saying it is. And we're like, no, it's not. We sent you. It is what it is. It's call, carrier, phone activity. Like, we're not making it up. And I'm going back and forth with him, and I'm like, what is going on here? He calls me a couple days later, and he's tail between his legs. He's so apologetic. He didn't realize that he was reporting on unique phone calls through his call tracking system. And so he looked at unique phone calls versus total call volume and told all his clients to fire us because he made that error. Now, I have the same problem, because what a lot of marketing agencies try to do is they try to create phone calls as matters in any technology. And inevitably, it's not a perfect solution, because it could be a returning customer, right? Or any unique phone call doesn't need to create a matter, and then you have to go in and manually delete it. So here's what I did, and I think this is really cool. I had my developer help me create an API between our call tracking software and our CRM, because we have another integration where when we get a message from the answering service, so like lawyers call us all day long, and I only create a new deal in HubSpot when the answering service sends me a message, not when a call comes in. But that doesn't have the call tracking metrics in it. So I was like manually updating it, and it would be like 6 to 8 a week are just calling in, right? Among various other things. So I was like, I wonder if we can hook up an API from my call tracking software to HubSpot to look up the phone number when that code comes in, because there's a specific integration code. And we did it, and it works. So now if you call one of my tracking numbers, it automatically updates all the information in HubSpot. And I think that solves a very cool problem for marketing agencies and for lawyers out there. So I'll nerd out with you on that later. I don't remember what we were even talking about. I just wanted to tell you that story.
Hey, you know what? That is badass, man. It's always fun when you have kind of an annoying problem, right? It may not be an earth-shattering problem. Like, I just go and delete the deal. It's fine, right? You've dealt with it forever. It's the way it is. Fine. But when you actually come to an elegant solution like that, it's so, you got to celebrate that stuff, because it's hard, right? It's really hard. Like, technology makes it seem like everything's easy. It's not. It's still not. Even in the age of AI, it's not easy. There's no easy button. I promise you. It takes discipline and strategy, and sometimes engineers and developers. A lot of times engineers and developers.
So,
but I'll tell you a side note on that. I used to create some crazy workflows to try and only create a contact with a lifecycle stage of lead, which creates a lead in HubSpot, a lead object, right? And I would do that using native integrations and a Zapier approach to try and make sure that like first time callers have that happen, right? What I realized over time was like, as cool as that was, and as helpful as automating a contact creation can be, sometimes just having the person on the phone hit add contact and capture their information in a form, and then go back, because you said you can go back and retro update, then go back and map, what the person put as the intake, the caller ID, with the caller ID that came in for the call tracking software. Now you've got your source attribution automatically that way, as opposed to having them have to like find the thing that you automatically created, and there's delays and it's annoying. So like sometimes the more simple solution is the better one, right? So, but yeah, like I've made some pretty cool, complicated, and I still find useful Zaps and make.com approaches to integration, especially with matter management systems, because that's key too. But yeah, show me what you made. I'm curious to see that in action.
Well, I will. Awesome. I don't even know. I'll send it to you. I want to ask you specifically this. I have a whole agenda that I come into these things with, but then when like I know the person, it goes out the window. So I want to bring this up because I was just, obviously I'm thinking about you because we're going to go like do this thing and sometimes we chat, right? And something you said before, I don't remember what it was. Maybe we were talking about reporting, is you had a LinkedIn post like a few months ago where you just put like a question, like it was all about what we're talking about, naming conventions of certain things. And it was, hey, how many potential new clients do you have? How many turned into qualified leads? How many turned into paying you a retainer? And it was just like, hey, I don't know. And then firm B had just like and you could tell it's a HubSpot report, because if you use HubSpot, they all look the same. You can make them look a little different, and it's a HubSpot report, and it's like, this is it, and it's dynamic. Can you talk about the value that provides to a law firm out there who's listening to this, that's like, man, I really want to use technology. I don't see the value in it. Like my intake team does a decent job. I make X amount of money, but like knowing your numbers for your business, and people talk about this all the time, right? Like you could say your revenue is 5 million, but what's your take home pay? Like there's a huge difference there, right? So what value does like having all of that stuff, what the end goal is, getting that report and knowing the numbers, what does that provide to a law firm and a law firm owner?
The first thing it does, because most of the firms I talk to don't know. They just don't know. They don't have a benchmark or a baseline. And when like you're like, it's going well, it's fine. Like what is fine? Like let's define fine. Let's figure that out, so we know what actually is okay, right? And then once we have that, like you could do nothing and just know that if you're at fine, you're headed north towards your North Star. Most of the firms that I work with are looking to grow, right? And so I don't think you can grow intelligently. I think you can get lucky and you can grow through chaos. I think that happens a lot of the time. But I think if you're deliberate and disciplined and diligent about knowing your numbers, knowing the conversion rate between, the lead, the prospect, the PNC, and the client. By the way, listeners, if you want like a very basic life cycle stage or funnel for your law firm, there it is. A lead comes in, totally unqualified, doesn't matter who it is. It could be me selling you services, right? That's a lead. A prospect is someone that your intake team has qualified. That's a human being looking for an attorney, ideally something that you practice. A PNC is after the consult, the attorney decides, yes, this is a matter that we want to take on. So you send them the agreement and fees. So that's PNC, and then ultimately a client, right? So take that, and like if you get nothing else from this conversation, you've got a life cycle stages in a funnel. But if you know the conversion rate between those, right? And even from lead to client, if you know what that is at your baseline, you can start understanding what are some things we can do to improve that. Or are we going away from that normal? Are we actually no longer fine? Like I hired someone new because, Rob left after, 3 months of the chaos that is my law firm. I got a new intake specialist. We're starting fresh. Well, Rob was operating at a 5% conversion rate, and, Bill is at a 2. What's the difference? Like it at least surfaces the conversation of like what's going on here, you can get a lot more data, right? Like how long does it take you to get back to the lead? Shoring that up, making that, especially in need-based practice areas like PI, criminal, like speed to lead is key, right? You should even be considering, how do I text them immediately upon a form fill? Like that's how important that stuff is. But when you have that, again, accurate data to work off of, now you can start figuring out which levers should we pull, right? From an intake perspective, but also from a marketing perspective. And I don't know if you've seen this report, Nick, but this is another unique kind of differentiator when it comes to HubSpot. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but there's the concept of demand gen versus demand capture, right? So like what generated the demand for them to reach out to your law firm? And then like where did they actually go to do that? Did they click on an ad, go to Google, what have you? Sometimes those are the same, right? And you figure out what generated the demand by asking the question at some point. How did you hear about us? You can be a little bit more elegant. Who can I thank for referring you to me, right? Like there are different ways to go about that. But the point being is HubSpot, what I can do in HubSpot is I can have a how did you hear about us field. That's just an open text field. I'm not leading the witness in any way by making them select Google or paid ad or whatever. I just leave it blank. They can lean on the keyboard, and based on what they've typed in that, I can use workflows in HubSpot to look at the keywords within that field to then bucket them appropriately so that I can actually report on it, right? Because it's really hard to report on a open text field with an infinite number of misspellings and possibilities. So like that's a really cool feature too. And you start getting data like that from your technology based on your processes and people. Now you can start figuring out, well, should I be investing more in radio ads? Should I be investing more in billboard? Are LSAs crushing it for my business, right? Like now we're cooking with fire here, folks. Now we're making real good business decisions around reliable data. Because again, that's the point, right? The point isn't to have a CRM to have it. It's to have a CRM to have data to make good decisions off of. And you can't do that unless you use it. So again, I'm going to say it for, I don't know, the 20th time. Please use your CRM. I'm begging you.
So we are cooking with fire because I'm going to do one of my favorite things is tell you again how I retroactively do things on HubSpot because you can fix everything. I'm actually so sentimental, and I really hope that it doesn't seem like bullshit to anybody. So I messed up my CRM really bad the other day before I commented on your LinkedIn and cried about it. And it's bad. Like emails went out, lifecycle stages got updated. I'm getting slacks. Like you broke all of new prospect, which is our term for a qualified lead. Yes, I know. And the first thing I thought of, I didn't get the quote right, but that thing behind you, the poster that everything is figure outable. I called it everything is fixable. I don't remember, but I said it in my head. I was like, okay, we're going to figure this out. Everything is fixable. Yeah. So you have to understand, I operate at a very high volume, and we have a number of account executives here. And so for me to put a plain text field on how did you hear about us, or like who can we thank, or any of that thing would be crazy. So there's a very large drop down for them. And we communicate all the time on like what falls where. There's definitions for things. However, when there's a new thing, I'll often get a Slack or somebody will come over to my desk and they'll say, hey, we heard about, or this person says that they heard about us from Robert Williams at ElevAmp. Do you know that guy? And I'll be like, yeah, I know that guy. I'll add it to the how did you hear about us field. And they're like, okay, great. I add it, we update it, and now it's a part of my reporting. You know, that's why I love HubSpot, is because everything, like your thing behind you, is figure outable. I'm very sentimental. So like that stuff,
it is so true. And this is a book, by the way. I highly recommend the book. It's a mindset, honestly. And I think it starts with like, not everything's figured, but like you should take that approach. Everything is figure outable, because then you're going to come to some sort of conclusion or solution or what have you. And it's just not being afraid to try it, fix it, tinker with it, dive in, and just figure it out, right? Go for it. So yeah, I think I will say, I gave you a couple tips around that, but one, you can back up data. Always, before you do workflow backup, hit the backup button. I'm so paranoid. I'm so controlling that it's actually rare where I will go and retroactively update. It's so, especially if you're using a complex workflow that interacts with multiple properties, like if you mess that up, even if you have a backup, it can still be like, what do I need to do now? I just, I was almost done for the day, about to head into the weekend, and now I'm spending my free time cleaning up my CRM database and apologizing for the auto emails that went out. But yeah, I think just be careful, back up. But you're using it, man. Like, that's good. Like,
the funniest part is I'm one of like 2 super admins who could even have run this workflow or have backed it up before I decided to make an insane decision.
You couldn't even have been like, wasn't me.
No, not that I would. I was like, oh crap, that was me.
Right.
Because accountability. Don't shirk your accountability out there, folks. Be accountable.
Be accountable. And also don't let people have the ability to break things. Here's the other thing I see law firms do. They keep sending me passwords over email. If I can beg the audience to stop doing that, like that's kind of a war that I'm continuing to fight. Just assume anyone can read your emails. Stop sending passwords. But like, dial in your users and their permissions, right? Does your intake team need to be able to see all the CRM activity in terms of emails and meetings? Like, probably not, right? So why do they have access? Why are they also all super admins? Just begging for problems. So it's the easiest thing to do because you don't get, because I get this a lot. Hey Rob, I still don't have access to the thing. It's like, that's right. They changed the permission settings. Like, I would rather be annoyed with the Hey Robs to go in and dial that in than just hitting the easy button, because that button exists with permissions, and giving everyone all the keys to the castle. It's not a smart, wise approach, especially as you're scaling as a law firm.
And if you are a super admin, with great power comes great responsibility. So don't hit re-enroll on a workflow unless you fully understand or are paying attention to what you are doing. Please learn from me.
Yeah, I wish HubSpot workflows, when you updated them, they default to enroll this list of qualified contacts or deals, whatever workflow you're working on. Like, I would rather them default to the don't enroll anyone, and then let me decide because I think they also make it very easy to, if you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what those settings mean, to accidentally click the one that then creates a whole.
I think you're giving me too much credit. I knew what I was doing. I just had a momentary lapse in.
It happens.
It happens.
It does.
We're going to fix it. Everything is figure-outable. Right. So, on that note, for those out there who would like to explore working with you, can you tell us more about your consulting services that you provide for law firms?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work usually in combination of 2 different ways. It starts with a project like a HubSpot implementation or an audit of some sort. And then I do offer, I'm struggling on what to call this, but like fractional CTO, tech ops is what I'm calling it, technology operations, because I don't have a better term for it. Or I meet with you on, either weekly, monthly, or quarterly to talk about your technology, to talk about what's working and what's not, to have a strategic conversation around that, while also identifying problems, opportunities, issues, whatever you call those internally, if you're a Fireproof or EOS shop. But we keep a list of things that we want to fix, and then you can pay me to fix those, or you might have an engagement with me that allows me to fix some of those and you fix some of those, or I can come on board and act like a full-time employee where I'm on your Slack channels and you're hitting me up and you're hey robbing me, and I'm marching from task A to B to C to D, and we're getting things done. So yeah, generally it's a fixed project just to get the CRM deployed and in place. Again, I focus on HubSpot because I have a whole system around that tool that allows me to actually get you to use it. And then you can keep me around to keep building upon that. Because again, I don't want to shoot the moon. I want us to use the tool at it's not a minimum viable product, but it's a really good head start product. And then let's build the capabilities and functionality on top of that over time.
I love it. And I forgot to ask you, where do they go? How do people contact you?
Yeah, hopefully you can find me. If not, I'm doing a terrible job. But ElevAmp.com, you can fill out a form there. There's even a meeting link. It's a HubSpot booking calendar where you can book a discovery call with me right there. I've got a couple other forms and resources if you want to fill out like, am I a good fit? They all go to me. But yeah, there's a number of different ways. You can hit me up on LinkedIn too. I'm pretty active on that, as you've mentioned, but would love to talk to folks and see what they're using, what's working and what's not, and get them up to speed. Because I think having a CRM that gives you good data is kind of table stakes. We need to get more folks there.
Hell yeah. Anyway, Robert, thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you to all of our listeners. We hope you enjoyed this conversation, and we will be back with another episode of Everything Except the Law soon. Be sure to check out previous episodes of our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and the Answering Legal YouTube channel. Links to everything covered, including Rob's contact information, LinkedIn profile, and all the resources that you could possibly need, will be found in the description of this episode, wherever you're listening or watching it. And if you are watching it, I need a haircut. We'll see you next time, everyone.